Apologies for keeping you waiting. How are you getting on? Enjoying your Estus soup? You know, it is perfect for starving off the cold. Got the recipe from a fella I met by Katerina. And here I thought undead didn't make good gourmets. In Erode, nothing goes better with a warm meal than a cold Siegbrow and a good story. So, make yourselves cozy, and I'll spin you a tale. Last we left off, I was telling how Gwyn and his retinue put the world together. Locked away a bunch of the dark soul off in the ringed city, out of sight, out of mind. Got the rest of humanity following his way of white. Everything was good. For a few hundred years, both God and man lived hale and hearty in the salad days of the Age of Fire. But before Gwyn knew it, his worst fears had started to come true. The fire was going out. It was slow at first. Gradual it came. The sun began to grow dim in the sky. Time, normally as steady as the hands of a clock, started to skip beats, then measures. The world grew cold. And Gwyn stewed and he stewed, desperate to find a solution that he could not see. It didn't help matters, of course, that his fellow lords had made themselves scarce at this point. Seath the Scaleless, the dragon he had appointed duke, barely ever showed his face anymore in the streets of Anor Londo, pursuing instead the solitude of his archives. There was tell of women disappearing from the streets around these archives, but Gwyn pushed such rumors from his mind. Surely he had other things to worry about at this point. Oh, and Grave Lord Nito? Well, truth be told, Gwyn was sometimes glad that the Grave Lord mostly kept to his catacombs. So, Izalith was his only confidant from the days of the war, and he confided his fears with her. Now, the witch Izalith, with the command of the soul of life, had become a mighty sorceress indeed, a sorceress without parallel. And Gwyn's talk of the fading of the flame, well, it intrigued her. For ages she had had the power to breathe life into anything. The power of her coven was unrivaled. Even the vaunted sorceries of the dragon Seath couldn't hold a candle to what she and hers were capable of. And she wondered, walking the streets of the city that took her name, why couldn't she start her own flame then? A flame of life, she saw, flourishing even where the first flame faded. And so, Izalith, her daughters, and the rest of their coven began to plan the incantations that would become her greatest work. The witches circled up in the city of Izalith, around a great network, a great lattice of runes and spellwork. Ages, it seemed, of planning now had come to this single moment. And they began to cast their spell. And for a moment, it worked beautifully. A fire of such brilliance sprung to life, fed by the witches of the Coven Izalith, and Izalith herself smiled. Her master work was beginning to take shape. And then it burned out of control. It was a flame of life, to be sure, but it was a flame unchecked, unbound. It surged forth and consumed the whole city, turning every life it touched into a being chimeric, limbs twisting, reforming, reshaping, and retwisting again. It was said that Izalith herself, at the heart of the blaze, became nothing but a twisting mass of limbs and flame, a veritable garden bed of chaos. For that was what the flame, Izalith and her witches, had came to be known as the Flame of Chaos, burning and twisting all it touched. And the beings touched by Izalith's flame, why, they became known as the demons. When Gwyn heard of what had happened down in Izalith, he was furious. He could not do with another distraction, not now. He had far, far too much on his plate already. The Age of Fire was burning to nothing, all of his efforts wasted in holding it back, and now Izalith's flame threatened to consume a land already besieged? Well, something had to be done, he resolved grimly. And what good was an army of silver knights if there was no war to deem them useful? So Gwyn sent his knights down to do battle with Izalith and her demons, to hold back the chaos. The Demon Wars would be Gwyn's last campaign, although he did not know it at the time. And his knights were able to hold back the tide, but it was at great, great cost. The chaos flames rent flesh from their bones, burned their souls into their silver armor, even as it burned that armor black as cinders. The revenants who returned from the war in Izalith were silver knights no longer, but knights of black, shades doomed to wander the world forever, undying, even as the ages turned. It is said that you can find them wandering the land today, still searching for a home they will never find. But back to the time of our story. Time, it seemed, was what Gwyn was all out of. His people grew distrustful of him as the sun began to fade and the light started to die. What good was a Lord of Light's protection if this is all that it could do them? Gwyn clenched his fists, looking out across Anor Londo, his city, at the setting of the sun. If the people did not love him, then he would have to earn their love. If they were to consider him a god, why then he would have to prove his divinity. And if he could not stop the fire from burning out, that was only because he had not sacrificed enough yet. But that is a story for another day.